Okay, the recording started. No, the recording started, but I'm very early. Let me stop recording. Forced us to, I guess, change our approach and really focus in on what's important and how we can help one another. So that's been a great benefit of kind of this experience. And yeah, again, I'm very thankful that, you know, be able to get someone of higher caliber as Lord Hastings, who succeeded and have done so much. And he's giving his time now for our community to help us out and share know-how and experience. So without further ado, we'll kick into it. So I'm going to share my screen, just kind of give a brief explanation as to who we are, what we do, and of course you'll hear from the man himself. So let me share my screen. Okay, so slide share. Okay, so here everybody. So for those that don't know our website, it's spiela.co.uk. Currently we're in beta mode, so we have got a new design. We're redeveloping at the end of the month. You know, we've had great people such as Anthony Hutchinson, we've had guys like Elliot, we've had Danielle. So, you know, we've had older audience and younger audience coming together to help shape and cultivate what our website will look like. And I'm sure they can tell you themselves that it's looking good. It's getting there. So they're helping their feedback. So we will have that ready by the end of the month, which we're really, really excited about. So for those who want to be a part of that, please do sign up to spiela.co.uk to register as a beta user. And of course, when you register, you have a chance to win Amazon vouchers as well, as a thank you for joining our community. So please do check that out. So yeah, in short, as what we explained, we're a community network for older working professionals and even young people and young work professionals coming together who want to learn from one another, hear topical situations and solutions to all things work related. Whether that be, you know, an actual 9-to-5 job, whether that be entrepreneurialism, you know, wherever it may be, you know, we're all kind of working towards something and wanting to learn from one another and experience that. So we're all about growing a community that is able to foster that by having lots of different types of people involved. So, you know, so we're a platform where opportunity providers and opportunity seekers meet. Again, just a kind of brief overview as to who we are and what we do for those who want to get in. So diverse and underrepresented doesn't necessarily mean just one set group of people. It's for all. You know, many people are, you know, underrepresented. Many people don't have opportunities, regardless of who you are, your credence, etc. So we're a platform that wants to break free from those labels by connecting people to opportunities to reach their full potential. Doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter how young you are. You know, what matters is you continuing to keep going. So, you know, we cater to all age ranges and wherever you may be. And so today, without further ado, we have the honor of having Lord Michael Hastings. So I first met Lord Michael Hastings actually in 2015 in Bangkok. That's where I also met Mark as well. And yeah, of course, when you meet, I'll be honest, when you meet a black man of such high esteem, you're kind of blown away by it, especially when you're a very young person as well, kind of just figuring things out and getting into this world. And, you know, being able to meet Lord Michael Hastings has been great. He immediately such a warm presence, and he's so friendly as well. For someone who's achieved and done so much, he hasn't got an air of snobbery about him whatsoever. He's genuinely such a lovely person, and always kind of kept in contact and back and forth with my Lord Hastings. You know, I've had his number for how long, and, you know, that's something he didn't shy to give away to, you know, the young people in general. So very thankful for him being that kind of open and friendly and accessible to someone like me. So reached out to him and said, hey, we got a call coming up. Would love for you to do our September kind of call. And he, of course, found the time to do so. So very thankful he's here. And Lord Hastings, he is the Baron of Scarisbrick. I'm not going to lie to you, I don't know what Scarisbrick is.
Where?
I don't know where it is.
It's in Lancashire.
Lancashire.
It's a little community near Southport, north of Liverpool.
Thank you very much for that, Lord Hastings. I should have researched that before we started, but thank you.
Before you be a scouser.
You got me whack.
So we have him here. He's the Baron of Scarisbrick, former global head of corporate citizenship for KPMG International, and he's the second chancellor of Regent's University London. So without further ado, I would invite Lord Hastings to now speak upon kind of himself, how he got to where he is now, and just kind of an introduction about himself for those that may not have heard of him, which is crazy. I'm pretty sure everyone has. But yeah, Lord Michael Hastings, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Ivan. Thank you so very much for your kindness in the introduction and for your constant communication, which has been wonderful.
Thank you.
And thank you for your persistence as well, which is also to be much adored. I have one of those lives that is best described as completely inexplicable, other than to say that a whole string of people have been very kind to me over the decades and have asked me to join them, join their companies, join their organizations, and drive, whether you call it change, impact, inclusion, differentiation. I've had a series of, I wouldn't call them accidents, because I'm very convinced of God's hand and anointing, and I kind of live by that. So every time I've gone from when I started off as a teacher to then working for Margaret Thatcher's government in the 1980s on urban renewal, anti-riot time, through to being in television at TVAM and then GMTV and then the BBC, and then being the head of public affairs at the BBC, being a commissioner for the Commission for Racial Equality, setting up Crime Concern, which is now Catch 22, which many of you will know of, and also working on being the first member of the Metropolitan Police Committee way back in 1992, and then eventually ending up at KPMG, and everything has been a phone call. And I'm being completely straight with you. It's been a phone call. I have not applied for these jobs. I haven't sought these jobs. I've never sought any honors. They just keep on giving them to me. I don't know why. There are lots in the front, lots on the back. And so I think an awful lot has to do with, if I can be really candid, it has to do with how willing you are to fight the long battle of transformation and to get your fingers into the murk and the dirt of the things that society is troubled about, and be willing to gift yourself to those challenges. And that's something that's never been difficult for me. I've always wanted to be involved where people struggle, and I still choose to be involved where people struggle. And then you just find things come your way. They just come your way. And favor is something I believe in very strongly, as in God's favor, not mine. I haven't got any favor to give. But I believe in God's favor. So I rest on that. I've learned through every experience that if I don't know anything about it, I'll research it until I find out. I'll read until I've learnt it, and I'll ask good and hard questions until I understand it. And then when I understand it, I'll then mull it over, marinate it in my mind, try to discover an awful lot more, and then put it into practice. And that's why I've never believed that avenues and roads that don't connect to your natural learning or to your degree or your lack of a degree should in any way be an inhibition to progress. It is all about how adaptable the mind is. So that's my strange introduction to you. I've held far too many positions in life. They're all on my bio. If you're really bored, you can read it, or go into LinkedIn. It's even more boring, and you can see it there. But I'm happy to answer any questions from you, Ivan.
Thank you very much, Lord Hastings, for that wonderful introduction. So yeah, we'll kick straight off into the three questions we have. Now, of course, Lord Hastings, when you give your point, or when you kind of finish explaining, we will give certain bits of time for some of the audience members to maybe ask questions and kind of engage a bit. But I will, of course, be monitoring the time and just kind of making sure that we're flowing consistently. So yeah, so apologies anyone, I'm not being rude, but we do have a time schedule we need to keep on. So without further ado, I'll kick off into the first question. And that is, as a community, so however diverse it may be, as a people, as a Spiela community, what should we be aligning ourselves towards as we end 2020, heading into 2021? So social trends, any kind of particular causes, opportunities post-COVID that we can look out for?
Well, Ivan, you kicked off by saying that 2020 has been, if I were to quote the Queen after the burning at Windsor Castle, she said it was an annus horribilis, which the Sun newspaper rather cheekily said, Queen's bum year. And of course, she was using Latin, not referring to her bum. And annus horribilis means a horrible year. Now, it's the interesting thing is that for those of you, maybe those of us, who found actually that ironically, we can end up doing more in every day as a result of Zooming than we were doing before, because we're not traveling. For some people, this has been a more productive period of the last 6 months or so, or certainly 5 months. But for others, the isolation has been tortuous. And I suppose when we stand back from the hard uncomfortable figures of the numbers of those who died from COVID, which is very different to the numbers of those who have been infected or tested and then recover, and the recovery rate is 97%. So when you stand back and you look at the numbers, those who died, you have to ask a difficult question around, is the disease the problem, or is the fear of disease the problem? And when it comes to recovering children back to school this week, when it comes to people going to their offices, when it comes to going back into the high street, making sure that we bring some sense of energy back into our city centres on which so many thousands of jobs rely, fear is the greatest pandemic rather than coronavirus. And I know that's a difficult thing to say, but it is more factually evident than is the case with the disease. So none of us are looking forward to what may or may not be an accentuation of cases. I don't want that. But let's assume that we managed to go through 2020 without more turbulence in our health system. We've also been afflicted by the painful and continuing and deeply scarring horror of since the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis in the USA, right the way through to Jacob Blake and every single incident in between, that depressing, mood-destroying fearfulness that grips communities, because discrimination causes all of us to feel that we are likely ourselves to be equivalent victims, if not our friends and family and others, and the pain is very serious. But we've got to look forward. And one of the anchors that I encourage the many, many young men and women who are around me that I have the delight to support is I push on them hard the World Economic Forum's skills agenda map. And if you've not got it, I urge you to go onto the World Economic Forum website. You'll see the 2022 skills outlook. So let me just go through some of those very quickly. There are 10 critical skills the World Economic Forum says are fundamental. Now, in case you're not aware of what the World Economic Forum is, I'm sure you see something of Davos every year on your news. This is when the leaders of business, the leaders of politics, the leaders of arts, the leaders of industry gather together in the high hills of Switzerland. You might say it's a Machiavellian plot. Well, it is what it is. And part of my role at KPMG was to be there for the last 13 years every year. And I tell you, it's the only place you'll see presidents and prime ministers, CEOs and chairmen and CFOs all in the same space, rubbing shoulders. If you want to look where the elite of the world are, that's where they are for a week in January. However, this year next year it's going to be moved to June as a result of the pandemic. However, the World Economic Forum represents the sharp edge of business and politics, leadership and government, culture and impact. This is what they say are the skills you need, that I need. Number one, analytical thinking and innovation. Analytical thinking depends very strongly on amassing multiple sources of information that are accurate in order to assess the detail. So not just listening to what friends and family say, or what's the trend, what's trending. That's not necessarily analytical thinking. Analytical thinking is knowing, almost like a student who has got to pursue for a doctorate, where does this detail take me? And I've got to look at the options around it. Number two, active learning and learning strategies. So I've been an advocate of the Sustainable Development Goals number 4, which is continuous and perpetual lifelong learning. We never stop learning, but if we do stop learning, well, tragically, we're covered in dust and likely to seize up in the snow. We've got to be perpetual learners. Number 3, creativity, originality, and initiative. Our world is actually very driven now by not just design and color and flair and artistry, but it goes much deeper than that. It's the nature of how you apply technical and numerical and mathematical and design skills to make life more functional. And all of us have a role to play in doing that. Number 4, technology, design, and programming. We need to be competent at knowing how to manage the pace at which Technology is thrusting its innovations upon us. Number 5, critical thinking and analysis. So quite deliberately, whatever your political persuasion may or may not be, but I urge you to have one. But if you have one, and let's just say for half a minute, your political persuasion is left of center, then you need to be a member of the right of center think tanks. You need to spend time understanding. If your inclination is to look at The Guardian online, then you need to look at The Telegraph online. See, you cannot be a critical thinker if you only listen to the things that make you feel good from the same sources. A critical thinker, an analytical person, assesses all edges and gleans wisdom from wherever possible. Number 5, six, complex problem solving. That means to be able to look at things that seem intractable and work them through until they're done and delivered. Complex problem solving, not easy ways out. And I'm going to venture to say something that might be a bit sensitive, but here's an easy response to the Black Lives Matter movement. Protest. That's an easy response. We can all do that. Take half a day off, go out in the streets and put our hands in the air. But it's necessary. The complexity is how you change the ingrained institutional discriminatory systems that deliver justice. That's the long game. Number 7, leadership and social influence. Those are fairly obvious. Number 8, emotional intelligence. Who would have thought that one of the critical skills for 2022 will be emotional intelligence? Well, it is, because actually, if we've learned to be empathetic, understanding, more aware of what matters in our heart, then these last few months where we've all been celebrating the National Health Service, I hope you have, I certainly have, if we've all been appreciating what we call core workers, essential workers, if we've all been thinking about the vitalities of making sure our lives matter because we stay healthy, let alone we protect others, and we're generous and kind, emotional intelligence is a building block to ensuring that is continuous. And if you're struggling with emotional intelligence, the answer very simply is find a difficult situation that's not natural to you and spend time there. Go to a homeless place, a shelter, a housing estate. Sit in with those who are not your natural territory. Get alongside difficult people. I have plenty of them around me, I can tell you, many times, all the time, but I've got to treasure them all as much as I find the easy first-class winners. Number 9, reasoning, problem solving, and ideation. In other words, using the full scope of our minds to think our way through from complexity to outcome. Number 10, systems analysis and evaluation. Now, a good example of that was the algorithm that was being used to rate down GCSE and A-level grades. Well, it needed some systems analysis, didn't it? After all, it was only going to allow a 1% increase overall on GCSE grades. Well, that is inevitably going to mean that many will be leveled downwards. If that's the case, delete it. So systems analysis means thinking it through, which actually somebody in the DFE should have done more seriously than just apply it, because it was an easy way to get the results through. So those 2022 skills, look them up. On the parallel side, you see the declining skills, you see the growing skills. You're saying, how do we get ready for post-pandemic, or at least holding true during the next phases of it, which means living with disease. And I share this one statistic with you, just not to frighten you, but just to say, we've got to keep perspective. The World Health Organization, its own data reveals that based on the best estimates of the outcome of deaths globally from COVID in 2019, the numbers of those who will die of cancer is 4 times greater. We don't lock off our economy over cancer. and we don't distance ourselves over cancer. We need to think very carefully about how we've allowed ourselves to become fearsome and fearful.
Ooh. Right, that was, I definitely learned quite a bit in that. Thank you very much, Lord Hastings. And now I want to open it just for maybe say two or three questions from the audience before we proceed. So if anybody has a question, we'll probably take about two before we go ahead. Please do ask Lord Hastings now. Nobody does, we'll proceed.
Hey, Patrick,
may I jump in, Ivan?
Yeah, of course, Darren. Go ahead.
Lord Hastings, great to meet you. And I have been reading your Wikipedia page just immediately before the call. So if I've got something wrong, I'm going to blame Wikipedia in terms of your background, your experience. But really great to meet you. I was sort of interested in the point that you made around, seeing the world from another perspective. Actively seeking out, the other side of the street, what's going on, the other political, legal, whatever perspective, to kind of make sure that you're getting a sort of a more rounded perspective on the world. I guess to some extent that feels sort of the exact opposite. What you're encouraging is the exact opposite of what seems to be happening at the moment, which is the world is becoming more polarized, more factionalized. And so what would your sort of advice be, I guess, in the sort of times that we're living in, where social media seems to be dividing into tribes, where we are picking the Guardian or the Telegraph in your example, rather than, actively soliciting wider views? What would your advice be to not just at an individual level, but a more sort of organization and systemic level? What we should be doing, I think, to counteract some of those negative trends?
Well, this may sound like a strange example, but this actually happened, and it's something I feel the parallel point will make itself. 3 years ago, I was asked to go to Abuja in Nigeria, to then be driven for about 3 to 4 hours north to go to the largest Boko Haram prison in Nigeria. And I was delighted to go. And it was a huge honor to meet a large number of insider terrorists. And it was a great honor to present many of them with recognition awards for the learning they've been doing, and to listen to their stories, and to embrace a very large number of them. And I can't tell you the people who panicked about me being there, but I didn't. I remember in the 1970s, Sharina's got a son whose name is Reuben. I had a friend called Reuben from Ireland who asked me to go and walk with him up the Falls Road in Belfast in 1974. That was the height of the conflict between the IRA and Sinn Féin, and of course the Protestant movement on the other side. And the Falls Road was the epicenter of the Belfast conflict. We walked the nearly 2-mile distance of the Falls Road down the middle. I was 15. I think we need to be pretty fearless about the places people tell us are fearsome. I don't make a habit of just going to threatening environments, but one of the worst townships in Africa is called Manenberg. It's in Cape Town. It's a drug-infested community of savage exchanges and violence. Every time I've been either there or around it, you literally hear the gunshots throughout the day. People die like just pigs falling over. But every time we put ourselves in a place that is distinctly either threatening or tense or different, challenging, we learn empathy. We learn about the tensions of the other side. We learn to see what it means other people struggle with. A lot of us think we have it hard, and go to a refugee camp and see what it's really like. Go to the heart of a rubbish dump. The biggest rubbish dump community in the world is Kailisha in Nairobi. Go there, see what it's like. Walk where the most desperate of all people walk. That changes our perspective. So I think we have to choose to be challenged.
Thank you very much for that. And thank you very much, Darren, as well. Yeah, so if anybody has one more question before we lead on to the next question,
I've got a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I'd like to say thank you to Lord Hastings, who was my mentor when I was a Commissioner for Racial Equality. And I know he's helped so many others. One of my close friends, Bobby Said, he opened the door for him to do the Emma Award, which was a tremendous success with the BBC and everything. And I spoke to Bobby, I mentioned you yesterday, and he said, please, to say thank you for all your help. There's some people who do the talking, but there's a lot of the walking has been done by Michael, and I'd like to say thank you for all the things you've done, and all the doors you opened for everybody else.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to talk about when you mentioned the cancer 4 times greater deaths. It puts things into perspective. But are you implying that there's a lot of these conspiracy theories around about the vaccine's going to be used to kill people off and whatever? Are you implying that there may be a greater reason for us to be scared, for the public to be scared by either the state or have you bought into not that conspiracy theory? I'm not saying you're conspiracy theorists. I'm just saying we know all these conspiracy theories are out there, or are you just commenting as a matter of fact that that 4 times many people have died, and we should think about that?
Well, I never give credence to conspiracy theories unless there is some hard and provable evidence to it. And people who are panicking about a vaccine miss a very important news announcement last week, which is that, thank God, Africa, the great continent of Africa, was finally declared polio-free.
Yes, I heard that.
Exactly, polio-free after a 50-year vaccine campaign. Now, if we're anti-vaccines, then we're very happy to see multitudes die of measles, mumps, rubella, and polio, and a whole series of other things. We cannot be illogical about this stuff. And I do not believe that there is a bolden conspiracy of nasty people out there trying to take us all down. It doesn't exist.
Yes.
But it is fair to say, I think, that governments, to a large extent, got themselves into an overdrive of panic about the situation we are now coming towards some more reasonable resolution on. We were first warned about 500,000 deaths in the UK, and then it came down to 200,000 deaths. Then there was, maybe 20,000 might be a reasonable number, but we're at 41,000 deaths now, and every one of those deaths is deeply regrettable and painful, and all the families involved. But you have to put 41,400 deaths into perspective against 70 million people. And when you put it into perspective, you then have to ask hard questions, very, very, very hard questions about the nature of the response and also the nature of the current response. We really do need not to, and I recognize what is required in terms of responsible behavior, and I seek to do that and to fulfill that consistently. But let me just say this one thing, which is I don't know how many of you may or may not share this, but there is this thing that has entered our consciousness called social distancing. And all of us rely heavily on the connected relationships which give us value and significance. If we now become a world where we're disconnecting and distancing perpetually from one another with fear, and we make each other the target and centerpiece of our fear, that is not a world that builds harmony and understanding. We need to know how to spend time with each other to discover the inner heartbeat that causes some of those differences to get resolved. I witnessed very, very close at hand the discussions that took place to bring about much of the peace that is now present in Northern Ireland in similar ways to that in South Africa. And people don't learn to trust each other at a distance. You have to take time to be together in common space, to hear one another, to understand one another, and to build common understanding. So I just urge you not to become people of fear or panic, not to become people of stress. We recognize every tragedy that is a reality, and none of us wants more of it. But what we don't want is a world in which distance becomes the norm and relationship fracture becomes the standard.
Thank you very much for that, Lord Hastings. And of course, and for someone that's worked many, many years within government, I'm sure you have more insight, of course, that you can provide for us, which you've done now, as opposed to just kind of speculation and news. We'll have one more question, just one more, then we'll tie this one up into the next one. So from Christian. So Christian, if you're alive, please do ask.
Yeah, thank you. It's very simple to talk about COVID-19 from a distance, and I hear what you're saying about the relative rate of deaths compared to that of cancer. I have had COVID-19. It took me over 6 weeks to get over it. It felt like somebody was sitting on my chest and that I couldn't breathe. My wife, who is an asthmatic, had it, and she thought that she was going to die. Somebody who was close to me did die. My parents had it. My mother is a type 1 diabetic. Her blood sugar spiked. Speaking from the perspective of somebody who had it, this stuff is real. And this stuff is very painful. And I have attended a funeral which was due to COVID-19. I do not think that it's fair to compare it to cancer because cancer is something that is not transmitted like a virus. Cancer can be avoided through behavior changes and lifestyle changes and so on. This is something that is very, very much different. And the other thing is the perniciousness of the thing is that it hits you where you're weakest and it makes you suffer on the things that you're weakest of. I was very lucky to get through it relatively unscathed. My wife still suffers from chronic fatigue. My parents still suffer from some issues associated with it. So social distancing, yes, I understand your point that we cannot be ruled by fear and so on, but this is a pandemic. And we will get past it once the science catches up to it. But at the same time, I don't believe that we should just say that, just blithely dismiss it as something as comparable to cancer or even in the same league as cancer. The two are clean, separate things. I'm telling you this, Lord Hastings, not out of disrespect, but I would like you to put a face to COVID-19. That's why I switched my camera on. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't want you to see me this show, but put a face to it. It's real. It's awful. It's hideous. And it is leaving families like mine devastated. So I would request, this is not really a question, but I would request that you please keep this in mind, that there are real people, real families like mine, which have been severely hit by this, and our lives have been impacted. My wife is still shielding. We're still in lockdown because in our area, the director of public health has said that we need to shield. So I understand your point that we need to not be ruled by fear. But at the same time, until such time as the science catches up, I would urge everyone on this call, take this seriously.
You made a very, 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 very solid point, Christian, and absolutely right. And I haven't disputed that. And I have members of my own family who've had coronavirus. So I know it and I get it. What I'm saying is perspective. It is real. And for those whom it afflicts and affects, it is devastating. And if it leads to someone's loss of life, or even the undermining of the quality of their life, it is absolutely an erosion of who they once thought they were, and then to take away all of that skill and push them back into a place that is very difficult to survive from. But I know that because I have members of my family who've gone through the same. I'm putting it into the perspective of the wider picture. And what I'm suggesting we do as we head into 2021, 2022, is we apply some of what the World Economic Forum suggests, and even the World Health Organization says, is that critical thinking and analysis. We check out constantly, not just based on individual circumstances, our own or anybody else's, but the total context. And Patrick made a very important point when he was talking about people who raise a series of possibilities around is everything essentially governed by a limited number who are trying to undermine us? Do we believe in these kind of theories that run around out there? Is it all down to 5G? Who's really pulling the tiller? Are we all basically at threat? Are we going to find ourselves waking up at the moment and there's a phone in the middle of our brain controlling us? All these things are real fears that people put around, and they cause us unparalleled damage. And I thank God for polio being out of Africa. I thank God at long last, and due to a vaccine. And I thank God for every scientist working on a vaccine for coronavirus now. And everyone who needs protection, we should give them protection. But I don't believe that we should shut our world down and break our core relationships out of fear.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lord Hastings, and thank you for that. It's important that we get these kind of questions and hear different views, and so well articulated on both sides. So I'd like to thank you as well, Christian, for that, and Patrick, and I'd like to thank you, of course, Lord Hastings. So we'll move on to the next question. So the next question, kind of separate from that, is inclusivity. With everything going on with, diversity and, this real big push to kind of get us closer integrated. I guess the question is for community, for Spiela community and beyond, the need inclusivity, how important is it? How do we, I guess, maneuver with inclusivity, and how do we leverage inclusivity, Lord Hastings?
Well, isn't it interesting that we've switched from talking about diversity and we now talk about inclusivity, and I think that's the right switch to make, because we've also learned that to be inclusive means not just us seeing more of ourselves in the places that are important, that make decisions that give us comfort, but actually bringing in people who are also like ourselves, maybe felt excluded, ways of thinking that have been marginalized. Be willing to take the time to build the kind of relational capital and thought capital to be genuinely inclusive. It's better to have, and I say this realizing that a very well-to-do senior Black lady executive made this point and got pilloried for it at One Young World some years ago. But I'll make the point because I actually agree with it. She made the point that actually you can have a very different group of people who look differently by color and culture around the table. But if they all think the same, that's not inclusive. You see what I mean? So to be inclusive means that we need to be ready to involve people within our lives who are not in our comfort zone, our sweet spot of thinking. So inclusivity is hugely important. Of course, it has a visual face to it. The differences between men and women, or rather the similarities between men and women. The differences between people of different ethnic backgrounds and the similarities between people of different ethnic backgrounds. But it's the stuff often that we don't see. We can see sometimes some disabilities and others we can't recognize because they're more in the mind than they're evidently in the body. People can be of different colors, but I realize this is a sensitive time in the US for elections, but some people would sit there and think, oh my gosh, look at all those Black people backing Donald Trump. Well, they do. And we have to live with that. And that means we can't just say, look, they're all wrong, they've all got to be Democrats. Well, not as easy as that. Inclusivity means including people who sometimes are so far off the edge, away from where we are, so that we can learn from them. We can bring their skills into the fore. We can strengthen our core because they're different. And we learn so much from people who are on the outside of our comfort circle. Now, how do we do that maneuvering? I cannot find, and I'll be honest with you, after my many decades of being in this business, and Patrick rightly referred to the time when he and I were both commissioners at the Commission for Racial Equality, way back in those decades called the 1980s into the 90s. Remember those years. And Patrick, when he came in all full fresh with great vigor and enthusiasm, and I had to, I hope, help him a little bit to find his feet. We would often think of diversity in those days as giving Black people and people of ethnic backgrounds, I hate that word BAME, it's just so confusing, but people of different ethnic backgrounds a better place, a more equal stance. And that is true. But inclusion means that those of us who are in those communities, Black and Asian, we have to include people in our circles who are not like us. Because that's the only way we're going to build common community. The only way we're going to build common community. And after all, that should be our priority agenda. You know, we've just, the march in Washington at the weekend was 57 years on from Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech.
Yeah.
And you know the critical line in that speech, more than any other line, of all the great dreams and ambitions he expressed so well. And I remember, frankly, as a child, watching the speech on the black and white TV, because that's how old I am, when he said that he dreams of a day that his children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Now, how do you bring character into the inclusion bubble? Well, it's all about whether or not it is true and evident that people are living lives of generosity, encouragement, kindness, support, enabling, backing, facilitating, sponsoring, lifting, less of themselves in a generation in particular and a culture that is all about the image, less of themselves, more of the other. That is also an aspect of inclusion. And of course, without an inclusive mindset, we're not kind to people who are less able than us. Without an inclusive mindset, we don't recognize those who find it difficult to speak out. Without an inclusive mindset, we don't choose to sit alongside those who look awkward or to take time with them. But inclusion is bigger than color, bigger than ism, it's bigger than formalities. How do we maneuver it? We make the choice to put people like that alongside us. I can tell you that I'm not able to show them to you because I wish I could, but I can't because they're in prison. Some of my dearest friends, who I treasure very deeply, are men serving life sentences. As I've got to know them over the years and spend time with them, I joy in the transformation I see in their lives. And these are people I respect profoundly. They made mistakes. The system caught them. They went to trial. They were convicted. They were given sentence. They're serving sentence. But they're still human beings. And there is a value to what they think, what they feel, what they have to say. And our society silences them. We don't hear from them for decades. But they need to be included as well.
Thank you very much again for that, Lord Hastings. I feel like every kind of speech, every kind of little sentence you give is hard hitting. definitely feeling it. Nah, it's really important. It's really effective. It's really touching us. And so no, you know, that's just the power of this, and this is great. And so thank you. And so again, just due to time, I'm opening up for 1 or 2 questions before we get to the general end anyway. So if there's 1 or 2 questions for Lord Hastings now in relation to inclusivity, please do ask, or we'll proceed to the final question. Oh, yeah, yes, Margaret.
Okay, thank you so much for that. For me, I think the thing that really sort of I struggle with a lot in terms of inclusivity is to do with the fact that I would like to know how we can go about actually, you know, dealing with our own biases and resistance. Because sometimes, you know, we always think about inclusivity in terms of, it's almost like forcing it on other people to see things from our perspectives. Whereas the true inclusivity, if you want to be somebody who's like an inclusion coach, you need to be able to face your own biases, your own resistance to some of the things that other people do, and be able to help people come up with their own vulnerability, so to speak, in terms of their own biases and their own resistance, putting that in a very safe place, stating it in a very safe place, so that, you know, you're breaking down those resistive tendencies, and you're then moving toward the inclusion module, so to speak. So how do we go about that? Because I think that's one thing that I would really personally love to be able to do, to get into that coaching of dealing with people so that they can actually accept those biases that we ourselves hold, but we tend not to actually want to embrace it and accept it and work with it ourselves. And I can take the whole thing about the Black Lives Matter side of things again, that it's so quick. We are so quick to actually just put this blanket catchphrase of Black Lives Matter and think it's all about blackness, whereas it's not really about blackness. It's about wanting to include everybody who has been disadvantaged in one way or another by discrimination, by that lack of inclusion in their daily lives. So how can we actually do this?
Margaret, are you from South Africa or from Zimbabwe?
I'm both. My dad was South African, my mom was Zimbabwean. So I am Southern African. Cream de la cream.
There you go, right over the border.
Yes, you can tell. And I've got
I can tell. Well, both by your name and your accent.
Yes, 40 years in this country, I still keep my accent.
It's beautiful. You need to do that. You need to do that. And
that's that's diversity for you.
So one of the organizations I am, well, they call me president or chairman of the council, is ZANE, which stands for Zimbabwean National Emergency. It's now become the leading finance aid charity into Zimbabwe, and we have a very substantial cohort of workers, around 30 plus workers who work for us across the country. And one of the difficult things I had to be very willing to be bold about with the charity, and it's led by my very dear friend Tom Benyon, and it does superb resourcing. The Zimbabwean diaspora in this country, which is to a large extent a very white diaspora, puts a large amount of money through our hands to support the kind of work we do in the townships and in the major cities of Zimbabwe. Yes. And when we began the work, way back now, nearly 17 years ago, and we were adamant, and I was adamant, that we had to equally serve the displaced white former farmland communities, where many of them, because of Mugabe's extreme violence and theft, had left them as destitute, without medicines or food,
absolutely,
as the black people in the townships and cities. The criticism of, why are you giving money to white people when actually they were just as equally starving? Now that mindset, and actually quite interesting, I don't know whether you heard today's news, Margaret, literally just a couple of hours ago, is that President Mnangagwa has announced that Zimbabwe is going to compensate the farmers' families who've lost their farms under the Mugabe regime. I don't know where they're going to get the money from. That's an interesting challenge.
We know it's lip service. It's not going to happen.
Well, there you go. But
it's lip service.
How did peace break out in Rwanda? How did peace break out in South Africa? There was the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in both cases. And the same parallel was followed in Northern Ireland. And it's really important to be able to embrace people who are different. We need to, one, hear the truth of their pain, which means we've got to hear the truth of their pain and the nature of their stories. We've got to aim at building relationships across what others see is the divide. There have been a lot of images since the tragic killing of George Floyd of little children, a little black child, a little white child, running along the road, holding hands together. We've seen all that stuff on TikTok and whatever, LinkedIn. You've seen all that stuff. It's there at Instagram. And it is true that little children don't start off finding other people who are different difficult. No. We just emerge into it because we condition ourselves to be more important than the other person. So Margaret, the answer is always going to be in building bonded relationships with people who are different to us. And we can't get away from that.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be done at national scale. It needs to be done at local scale. It has to be done at family scale.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lord Hastings. Due to time, we've got time for just one more question. Sorry, Patrick, go ahead.
That's a question.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Yeah, very quickly, yeah. I've taken exactly. I must have listened to you years ago because I'm involved in Amigo Month, the Amigo Month committee, which involves the African Portuguese speakers, the communities is Mozambique, Cape Verde, in a lot of those countries, and also Latin America, Hispanic, etc. From Brazil, all over the world, and so I'm a part of that committee, and we're celebrating our Amigo Month on the 7th, from the 7th of September this year to the 12th of October, to be inclusive, as you said, of Black History Month as well. Yes, and so I really would like everybody to try and get involved as much, even if it's virtually this year because of the pandemic. But also to mention that what you said about critical thinking, and the example, like to be, if you're reading the Daily Mirror, then obviously read the Sun as well to know what the other side of things. And I've had same sort of criticism sometimes, whereby in order to network, in order to a Black woman's entrepreneur network, I was encouraged people to go there, some of my mentees to go there, and then I took a picture with Boris Johnson last year, and the amount of criticism that I got for trying to help, you obviously got to work with who's in power. When it wasn't last year, it was January. So once, but trying to help, and then the amount of flack I got, I had to pull up pictures of myself with Jeremy. It doesn't matter what I did, doesn't matter how many people of colour I was seen with, until I pulled up a picture of me and Jeremy Corbyn, it didn't stop. It was unbelievable. So, as you said, the things you said about, being able to see the other side and also to work with the other side, is so important. And I know that, as I said, I saw that you've done that successfully and with great impact, and now you're here. You've helped so many other people, Michael, and I know that so I've tried to follow in your footsteps and try to help people from those other communities, and I'd just love to keep in touch with you. Now that I got back in touch after 20 years.
Well said.
Thank you very much for that.
I had a similar experience where I was speaking to a group of American Black business leaders in London. This is around about 3 years ago. And one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement had written an extremely painful article in Time magazine that listed the 8 things that Barack Obama promised to do that he never delivered. Well, I started to quote from it, and I got booed. And they wouldn't listen. And the moderator, these were all Americans in London, Black Americans. The moderator said, "You can't criticize Barack Obama amongst us here. He's a saint." I said, I'm telling you what African Americans are saying. Because sometimes we get so kind of hung up on our own view, we're not willing to listen to the objective necessity to either be with the uncomfortable or to hear the uncomfortable, and sometimes even to criticize those we think are our heroes. Critical thinking.
Thank you. Absolutely, and thank you guys. No, again, following up on this point of inclusivity, I guess do better than to hear this from my Lord Hastings. And no, thank you for your insights in that. And I think inclusivity is really important, especially as the way the world's moving, as we're becoming more collaborative. It's even more important we think collaborative as a general community. So No, that's a really, really good point. Even the point you made about, you know, we walk into these kind of dominated spaces, but they also have to come into our spaces as well, right? So kind of leveraging the opportunities that we have between one another. So well, thank you very much for that. And now we're going to proceed on to the final question before we get into the general discussions for Lord Hastings. So I guess the final question being, Lord Hastings, how do we as a Spiela community and beyond bring actual employment opportunities back into our opportunities? How do we go away, take what we know, have what we know, get to a certain status, and then give back in an effective manner, in which, you know, we can see tangible results and benefits from?
You know, one of the things that has been very difficult for students this year is being the cancelling of internships. Large companies, which are obviously saying, well, they're struggling, it's difficult for them, but they've cancelled internships, they've reduced work experience opportunities, and they've limited graduate placements. And I think that's tragic, because that is to say to a generation coming out of university or college or further learning that actually they got to just get out there and fight amongst the rest. When we've always had that expectation that it is almost like a rite of passage, a duty that falls on commercial enterprise, let alone public institutions, to create opportunities for others. So one of the things I do a lot, and I hope you will do a lot, is allow people to be alongside you, take them on a journey with you. I think it's very important. And if I can't tell you the number of times I have taken pretty ordinary, well, I mean, we're all ordinary looking, aren't we, without our makeup on? And, you know, I've taken, especially you, Ivan, honestly, deal with that beard. You know, bit of shade. You know, all of us are pretty ordinary people, but the number of times I've delighted to have taken someone who wouldn't think that they naturally fit into a high-level political or business meeting, and I take them in as a friend. And I take them to be in the same environments I'm in. And I literally mean I've taken them into royal company many times. And it's an important thing that we have an opportunity to do wherever we can bring others in who actually don't normally get access. Then we can help them develop skills which will get them towards employment. But there's also a challenge that rests on, and some of you I know are I'm sure are entrepreneurs, and you have your own businesses. And I hope your businesses will not just survive, but will thrive through this next very difficult period that lies ahead of us. Some businesses clearly are thriving. I mean, we're on a platform at the moment called Zoom, which has never had it so good. And a lot of technology companies have thrived during this period, but so too have supermarkets, pharmacies. You know, there are whole areas of our natural life that have thrived, but others it's been difficult. If you can make decisions that mean that in order to share resources a little bit more thinly, but a bit more inclusively, that you can bring in a young person who hasn't got that vital internship or graduate placement, or hasn't got that first step up onto a job or an investment towards a job, and your organization can make that difference, it is worth it. It's worth the extra $1,000, a few thousand off there and off there to create the space for them to get a step up between 2020 and 2022, when it's going to be tough. And I think it's going to require all of us to have an element of sacrifice, not just to give others opportunity, as in have them physically around us and with us, but also to help to pull the resource together to enable those investments to happen. It's a choice I make to do, and I would encourage you to think likewise. Now, if it might be tough for just an individual, then find collectives of people willing to put small amounts together. You know, when somebody said to me recently they were going on one of these very important walks in order to raise money. So I said, how much are you aiming to raise? And they said, well, I need to raise £1,000 for this. Well, I said, oh, great. Well, £1,000, that's 10 people giving £100. I went, oh? I said, yeah, that's just 10 people giving £100. Do you know 10 people? They said, I do. Could they give £100 over a year? Oh my gosh, yes. How much is £100 over a year? Well, do you know how much £100 over a year is? Just work it out. 12 into 100 is going to take you down to £8 a month. That's not bad.
Yeah.
If we think about things like that and say, can we resource the support necessary to help others to get employment skills development, links to work, mentorship, and the possibility of a leg up into a job? Let's think of things as how we break them down rather than we look at them as an obstacle. It's always about time. Time is one of the greatest gifts we can give. And I've seen so many rise in confidence just because they get the chance to be in a different environment.
Definitely. Oh, thank you so much for that.
I agree with that. Is there I found, and myself and Maggie and Shalene all worked together in schools where we took young people to places, offices, businesses, where they wouldn't have had access before, just to give them we called it a World Work Day, to give them an opportunity to get into that space, to see what it looked like, to see how the people were that were there, to start creating their network. So I did see that as quite important. And I also, in the previous employment I worked in construction, ran the work experience program, the graduate program, the internships, the summer placement program, and all of that. So I can see the benefit of that. Having said that, though, previously, not many of those young people were Black. The opportunities for those young people to come in on those more formal routes in business were not, for whatever reason, did not trickle down. So even though we had massive graduate festivals, massive graduate days, in London Hotel, graduates from all over the country, the percentage of young people from any other than white coming in was really, really low. So the opportunities were there, but they weren't coming through the pipeline. And I often wondered where that kind of bottleneck, where the blockage was happening. Were they not finding out? Were they not, what was the hold up for that? And I found the same with the work experience program. And in fact, I changed our work experience program to make it more inclusive. And even then, the number that we had come through was still quite small, unfortunately. So something that I'm passionate about with young people and getting them opportunities. We know it works. I know Maggie, Margaret has done that with me. Shalene has done that with us when we all work together. So we know it works, but finding a way to make sure that pipeline is inclusive of everybody is still a part of the initiative. And I don't know whether post-COVID that will suffer even more, or whether we'll find a way to give more young people the opportunity to come through, because it's definitely worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Shalene, as well. Thank you very much, everybody, for insight. That actually, thinking about that and kind of living that experience as well of, wanting to give back. It's easy to forget, I guess, not forget, but it's easy to just keep going and going and going and not necessarily remembering the key areas or how you kind of started off, and, being that easy as to just, help someone in some way. And as you said, Lord Hastings, time is a very, very valuable commodity. It's a very, very valuable element. We can't get it back. So, how we give it and who we share it to and what we can do with it is absolutely vital. So I think, this has been really, really thought-provoking, very insightful. And I guess it's just really good to know and understand from someone who has kind of, walked this journey for such a long time and has been able to give back to so many people. So, thank you so much for that, Lord Hastings. And that actually concludes the questions now. So I'd like to thank you, Lord Hastings, personally for your time now. So again, now this is the section where we open up for just a few questions and some collaborative discussion for a little bit. So if anybody has any questions for Lord Hastings, please ask now. Lord Hastings, do feel free to drop off when you can. But I personally like to thank you so much for your time today, and just being here with you now and just listening in listening to everything you've had to say and your experience. I'm sure many people in here have benefited from it. We do have about one question. Sorry, someone's had their hand up for ages that probably like to ask you. Is Isaka Sani. So just if Isaka has a question to ask, please do.
That's right. So thank you very much. I'm on public transport, but I'm managing to be in the program. Two questions. The first one is, what is the practical step that a young child can take to fit in a working environment that they probably perceive they could not fit in before? So if I understand, I've heard of the theories, the need for the opportunity to be created and all that, but I want to find out if they are practical. So for example, at the end of, or say during this, the child does step A, step B, step C, so that it will become practical for the person to pursue that direction. And also, the other one is a comment I want to make to Lord. I want to look at his argument on critical thinking and to disagree with him based on that, on the assumption that Mugabe was a wicked, heinous person. So from an analytical thinking perspective, how can that conclusion be drawn when one sits from the perspective of Mugabe, looking at when he signed the 10-year agreement when the land would be released back to Black people? That never happened. To juxtapose to the current situation, to the situation that he had to forcibly take the land. Thank you.
I found it hard to hear the first bit. I heard the bit about Mugabe. I'm sure we can comfortably disagree on that. And I invite you to come, I'm sure you have, but to come to Zimbabwe and see the work we do and see the legacy of Robert Mugabe. But there we go. But on the first bit, I think you were saying something, forgive me if I've not heard it right, around extending the practical reality for children, of extending experience. And if that was what you were saying, I think the one thing that leapt immediately into my mind was, thank God we live in a country of many, many, many free resources. And when I go, and I used when the children were little, take the children to great museums, galleries, and places of architectural thought, I'm always, and Shireen making her comment rightly about the absence of Black people or Black young people coming into the employment circles. You stand sometimes in these great museums and you say, where are our folk? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. These are hubs of learning that are free. Mm-hmm. And it's not just where you physically see in the British Museum, which for all the debate we can have as to whether the Greek marble should be there or not there, we're all sort of social. Let's go and look at it while we can. It goes back one day, let's go look at it while we can. So let's take these assets of world history and get the chance to see them. Now, taking our children on those journeys of discovery so that their minds are enriched. I can't tell you the number of families where I come across that the children have never been in parts of, whether it's central London or central Birmingham or central Manchester, wherever, they've never been there. Living in the comfort of their own small communities, but not seeing the richness beyond which is available. Yeah. And just to walk, for those in London, just literally walk the Thames from Wandsworth to Tower Hamlets. Mm-hmm. Take a look. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rather than, don't go on the underground everywhere. We don't see anything.
Get on a bus. Yeah.
Get on the bus. We'll all walk.
I can see me and Maggie nodding furiously, because that was part of the role that we did together, was taking young people from just outside of London or just from postcodes into town, put them on a bus, let them see London. They've only ever seen it on the news, and they live within 2-3 miles away from it.
Exactly. So go see, go discover, go climb a hill, go look over into a valley, go stand in a river. Do these things that people. I remember when a dear Nigerian friend came to see me a couple of years ago in Parliament, and he said the reason he was late was because he was having to take the children to school that morning. I said, I thought your wife normally did that. You always told me your wife did that. He said, well, at the moment she's climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. I said, oh, that's fascinating. I thought Black women didn't climb mountains.
I've climbed mountains. Can I just add to that?
Exactly. And she took 7 women with her.
Yeah.
Climb a mountain.
I grew up in a big tower block, and I had a burning desire from growing up living up high, to climb mountains. And I didn't know any mountains, and I didn't know how to climb one, and I set my mind to it. And I did the 3 Peaks Challenge and climbed lots of mountains and raised money for charity. And there was, in the whole time I did, the whole 6 months training that I did to do the 3 Peaks Challenge, I only ever met one black woman and one other black woman on the mountain. It was amazing.
we gotta take these. Go on, Margaret, sorry.
I think that's a very valid point, because, you know, this whole thing about ourselves, excluding ourselves from these very important learning environments, what then frustrates me is that when we don't do that, what we are doing is we are putting the education of our children, the education of even ourselves, about our own culture and about our own things, into the hands of people who are not of our culture, who will write history according to their own perception, as opposed to the perceptions of the genuine people who've lived and walked the talk. Because you were talking about museums and all this type of stuff. I get so frustrated. I always go to the London History Museum there, and I go to the areas which have got African or minority ethnic type of artifacts in there. I'm looking for a black person or an Indian person to tell me about India. I'm looking for an Ethiopian black person to be standing to where the Ethiopian things are, so that they are telling me from an authentic perspective, because they are talking about things that they've walked the talk, they know where these things are coming from. But we leave these things and give them to the hands of people who might not actually genuinely understand the cultural perspective of narrating the story to us. And then we have the history that we then learn, which is written very much from a Western perspective, with a Western ideology, with a Western benefit in mind. And we remain enslaved into the Western way of thinking. And we can't teach anybody about our African history. But we allow other people who are non-Africans to come and spend 3 months, 6 months doing a research project, and they write a book, it becomes a bestseller, and it becomes a book that's used in universities, schools, and everything, to say this is what Africa is about. And then they blanket Africa, which has got 44 countries, as one nation, which in a way it is actually true. It's one nation. That's what it was originally, you know? So I think, you know, I just get so frustrated when I see you get on the tube. If you are on the tube, 9 times out of 10, you look at the non-black people on that tube, they've got books that they are reading. They've got their, if they're on their phones, they've got a book that they're reading, they've got something that they're doing there. What are our black people doing there? They've got headphones in there and it's do-dum, do, do-dum, do, do, do-dum, do-dum. What are you learning? By the time you get to work, all you've done is you polluted yourself with, most of the time it's even music that's very abusive to your own people. But the other person has learned something from a book that they've been reading. Their English is improved, their grammar is improved, all those type of stuff. They've got a different perspective of what the world is all about. I think, you know, we need to get into this bit of really encouraging people to, education is important, and we are not doing it very well. We are allowing other people to educate us from their perspective, whereas we have the know-how and we should be the ones who are actually educating people about our history.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Sorry to cut in and spit. Lord Hastings, we've got 2 more questions. I don't know how you are for time.
I've literally got
one more.
Okay, I'll do
one more. All right. Sorry, guys. Going to take one more, and that will come from Danny Cole. So the hand has been up for ages. So we're going to got one question, as Lord Hastings is a busy man. So, Danny Cole, could you ask your question? Danny Cole. Okay. Danny, sorry, you're not responding, so I'm gonna have to move on. Elliot, if you're ready.
Hello, sorry.
Oh, Danny said. Okay.
Thank you so much for putting this together, Ivan, and thank you, Lord Hastings, for speaking today. I wanted to talk about the current education system that we have and how it's affecting young people, because the system was already failing young people, especially young ethnic minority and young Black people specifically. But now with the coronavirus is amplified more. So how do you think moving forward, we as Black people, as a community, we can put in a certain infrastructure to give our young people better life chances? Because if we go back to the same system, we'll still be having the same problems. So what do you suggest should be put in place to give us different life chances? And one thing that I'd also like to say is that one thing I know a lot of people know is that as inflation happens, the standards of living rises as well. But one thing people don't notice is that in the day and age we're in, you need multiple sources of income as well, which requires skill sets nowadays more than just having only degrees. So how could young Black people or young ethnic minorities that are disadvantaged by the system, what infrastructure could be put in there for them to actually prevail? And what new system do you think should be put in place for them to do good?
Well, that's a very powerful question, and I think everyone would agree that the education system as we have it now is not 100% ideal for the nature of the world into which the next generation is emerging, or even the current generation is emerging. But that said, and I really do believe in perspective based on facts, when it comes to looking at results, outcomes, even from the assessments of this year's A-levels and GCSE performance, children primarily from, let's just say it as it is, Black African households do better than many children from urban white households do. And that's just hard data. Caribbean boys have a slightly lower performance level than many African boys from African households do. African girls do extremely well consistently along the line and much higher than many other minority communities do. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the system is good. It just means that the results, outcomes that are documented are slightly better in some cases and less worse in others. This is an old-fashioned thought, but I'm an old guy, and there's a couple of old people on here as well, I note. So we're all in an old people's club. Anyway, there was something we were very used to in that decade called the 80s and 90s, and it was called supplementary schooling.
Yes.
And it was when communities of people recognized that there were cultural necessities, there were skills necessities, and there were duties of knowledge transfer that were not easily happening within the formal structure, and particularly catch-up that was needed for understanding additional work, and that now is particularly acute when it comes to pacing with technology, let alone differentiated international learning. And those institutions used to be run by churches, and they used to be run by community networks. As time has gone on and schools have become so much more embracing, they've to a large extent disappeared. If we want to really put some metal back into this, some backbone back into this, we need to put the supplementary schooling notion back into reality. We say we care deeply about children of our own community. Well, let's get those charitable groups, those agencies, those collaborative networks, sites, facilities, and do it. And it doesn't require a long conversation. It just requires committed individuals to make that work. I'm going to have to go. I'm already late now.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lord Hastings, for the time.
Bless you all.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, Lord Hastings.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Before we wrap up, and some of you that weren't here at the start, thank you all for joining. That was a really interesting call in lots and lots of ways. Over in the comments box, we started off the call saying that if anyone had any interest in, especially based on some of the things we've heard today around inclusivity, young people, if anyone had any links to any articles, podcasts, books, or any information that you might want to share, could you pop the link to it in our comments box, and I will collate all the information and send it out to you all via email sometime tomorrow. What we're trying to do is to gather, you know, a collaboration of information that we can all share. We've got a big network between us. We are diverse individuals from lots of different places, and something you might recommend might really make a change or a difference to someone else. So if you pop over and scroll to the top, you'll see some of the ones that have been added already. Don't worry, I will save them all at the end of the call and get them all together, and we will publish all the resources and see what we can get from that.
What's your email address for those who can't? I'm fiddling around my phone, but what's your email address so we can send it in?
Yeah, you can send it to me at Shireen, that's SH, it's on the screen, Shireen@Spiela.co.uk.
I'd like to thank everybody, and sorry for those that had questions up, hands up, and they couldn't answer any questions, so apologies for that. But of course, there'll be more events, more times to really get involved, and you know, this next month should be very, very exciting for Spiela, especially as we're going into our next phase of development. So we welcome all of you guys, we welcome your feedback, we welcome your input, and we hope you grow with us. So yeah, thank you everybody for a wonderful evening. We'll be back soon with a bigger, better one. We've got a few surprises, really, really cool one coming up next as well, really, really cool. So are we sure to check your emails, please? Check your newsletters. I see how many of you lot click, so don't lie. Check them. That's the way you're gonna know now. I see how many of you lot see the emails. You don't think I don't see the analytics? So
yes,
looking at emails.
So please do make sure, you know, if you'd like us to run more sessions like this and you've enjoyed this, please do register with us.
Please talk, please send your inputs. We want to grow this into a very powerful collaborative community, and it can't be done without you guys. So thank you so much. Have a lovely evening. Please drop your details below. We'll be in touch. And yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you, Spiela community, and I hope you have a wonderful night.
Can you keep it open for a second?
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a lovely night.
Lovely to see you.